Hey! I am ready to talk about 294.
Live from the Talking Joe Studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey! Get over it! Hey, you! Getting over your podcast blues. You're with Talking Joe, and it's me, Mark, the chief croupier for the Talking Joe Comics Podcast Casino. If you're new to the show, you can find out all of the details over at the website, that website being talkingjoe.co.uk. Today we will be looking at G.I. Joe ARAH issue 294, released 29th of June 2022. It is the fourth part of High Stakes. And joining me as always, it's a real American casino bellhop. It's Tim Finn. How are you, sir?
There are a lot of knots and snags and holes and cracks and crags in your intro there, Mark, but I won't be nagging like an old hag, because this was an issue worth, I'm going to mix my metaphors, crowing about.
Okie
I'm going to cash in my chips and call your bluff. Hello, listeners. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Tim. How's your week been?
Good. I was away, and then I got home, and that's nice. And there was miniature golf this week in two different states.
Wow, not so miniature. That sounds like a massive golf course.
If you're listening to this and it's cold where you are, everyone, we're recording this and it's warm outside. And as a contrast, we did miniature golf that was built in 1948 and is closing at the end of this season. And then later in the same day, we did miniature golf that opened, did they say 3 months ago? And was indoor and blacklight and sort of futuristic. So rarely do I do more than one course in a day. And this one was as much contrast as possible.
Out with the old, in with the new. So, Tim, last time we spoke, you poured a little bit of scorn on the suggestion that we would be catching up again so soon to talk about the next issue. How do you feel about that now, that you've been proved wrong?
That it would be coming out so quickly, or the comic itself?
About the fact that it came out on time, so quickly after the last one.
Well, following a schedule or catching up on a schedule are both good to me. And as I have said before in this podcast, this comic could be bi-weekly or weekly, and I would be fine with it. So as much G.I. Joe as IDW can or needs to publish.
And speaking of which, the content being published is taking us at a hurtling pace towards the finale of issue 300. And Larry, faking it all my life, Hammer, has been posting about reaching that conclusion or sort of drawing near to that conclusion. Let me be clear, nothing has been officially announced about who will take over the G.I. Joe license, and nobody has contacted me. It may well be that 300 will be my last issue. 300 will be both a conclusion and a cliffhanger, with enough leeway to allow continuation of the ARAH storyline without killing off any characters. Been a wild ride these past 40 years, and I am humbly grateful to all of the loyal fans who have stuck by Joe's through thick and thin. So, I will be completely out of work after ARAH 300. Maybe I can actually build some of those model kits I've been collecting, or finish my tell-all expose of the comic biz. So there we go. It is the words from Larry on the latest status of what's happening for 300 and what's happening after it. Tim, thoughts?
Yeah. I'm simultaneously surprised and also not surprised, because if I thought about what Hama might do in wrapping up the current story, this would be my guess. But it's also still surprising to hear it actually spelled out. But also there's enough ambiguity here that, this is not the plot to 300. This is an approach. And part of me has a hard time believing that no one has approached Hama. I'm not saying he's being untruthful, but I feel like, well, surely there's been some informal, message sent with Hasbro involved or not with Hasbro involved, some other publisher. But something that did occur to me just this morning, thinking about the new issue and sitting down for our podcast, is the amount of time that might pass between issue 300 and whatever might come after, which we could call issue 1 or issue 301. Assuming that another publisher takes over, assuming that Hama writes it, and assuming that it continues this continuity, right? And then assuming that issue 300 arrives in December, the new issue is not going to arrive in January. And, think about what IDW did a couple years ago when it wrapped up its roughly 10-year, 12-year? Transformers.
What Devil's Due did. Talking about?
No. When IDW wrapped up its Transformers continuity that started with all the Simon Furman stuff, and then wrapped up with the James Robinson and John Barber stuff, and Mairead Scott with the Unicron story. For 2 or 3 months, there were no Transformers comics. And then a new continuity started with that bi-weekly series, right, which right now is wrapping up. And so some new publisher is going to need to get their own production schedule ramped up. Someone's going to write it, someone's going to draw it. They're going to have to, this publisher, the editor there is going to have to figure out how the actual schedule works with approvals at Hasbro. This comic takes longer to make than a normal comic because there's this third party that it is involved, and working out the contract. It doesn't matter what a rumor online said 6 months ago until a contract is signed and then a new publisher actually starts their pipeline. The writer, whoever it is, isn't going to start writing. And this publisher, whoever it is, may want to get some work banked before the first solicit. So it occurred to me this morning that you and I would be out of a job come January. We will continue our even odd episode Leapfrog, where we talk about Devil's Due with our co-host Jay. But in January, you and I are not going to be talking about a G.I. Joe comic that's continuing the Marvel and IDW run. And that may be February and March and April as well. And that feeling hit me in a funny way.
Yeah, we shall see. I mean, sort of, I guess the solicits are generally 3 months ahead, and, press releases and things often before that. So once, the ink is dry on various contracts and things start to get teed up, then hopefully we'll find out before too very long what some of these plans might be. I was just looking back to the Devil's Due IDW kind of transfer of power, and the cover date for the last issue of Devil's Due G.I. Joe was June 2008. And the first issue of IDW's G.I. Joe, the issue 0, that contained elements from Cobra Origins in the main book, was October 2008. So there's only a short break between the two of them. So I imagine if once things are settled legally, that whoever it is will probably want to try and push on and hopefully have a big enough pipeline that they can be working on things in the background for a few months before we start seeing things.
Yeah, and another way of looking at it is that the next publisher of G.I. Joe, right? So IDW's license, I think, goes through the end of 2022, and presumably the next publisher's license starts in 2023, and maybe it's a 5-year term, 5 years times 12 months, 60 months from whatever month it starts in 2023. Let's say it's March, but it might be a calendar year. It might be that this publisher has all of 2023 and the next 4 years. And so to your point about having a shorter gap, any months at the beginning of 2023 that the next publisher is not taking advantage of by publishing G.I. Joe comics and making money off them is money that publisher is not making.
Yeah.
We think of this so much as story, but it's business too. You know, a licensee, excuse me, is only going to make G.I. Joe comics because they think they can make money and tell stories, right? Just as Hasbro is only going to make that deal because it's locked in that Hasbro will make some money.
Yeah, you're not going to want to do it and lose money, but I think there's also and going to be an element of whoever picks up the license that they're just going to be enthusiastic and excited about it as someone, you know, as a creator in their 40s or 50s might be, having grown up with the brand.
Yeah, and yes, I think whoever is licensing this is someone who isn't just a business person who looks at licenses and, you know, oh, should we do Playmobil comics? Should we do Duplo comics? Should we do, you know, Visionaries comics? Clearly, this is someone who understands that G.I. Joe is highly visible, and also it would be someone who has some affinity for G.I. Joe. And then, you know, hopefully they hire people who also have an affinity for G.I. Joe. I am excited, to that point you just made, that whoever takes over, there will be some new energy. As much as I like the solid job that IDW has been doing, and you know, you don't get any sort of extra reward for publishing your 13th year of a comic or your 14th year of a comic. Yes, you might hit a milestone issue like 150 or your 150th issue, but you know, you go the other way, and every 6 issues, a publisher restarts a book at issue number 1, gets a lot of excitement, but slowly burns through that excitement with a law of diminishing returns. But there's something to be said for a new publisher being able to make a big splash next year with new people working on G.I. Joe. And I suspect some established people will also work on G.I. Joe. You know, IDW grabbed a few people for G.I. Joe who had worked on G.I. Joe Devil's Due. IDW grabbed a few people who had worked on Transformers. And, you know, that's not just artists, that's also colorists in the case of Transformers.
Yeah, and realistically, I think probably when they come to launch, they'll want to have a big fanfare and a splash focusing on probably their version of G.I. Joe initially. So it will be, you know, big announcement, and here's our new number 1, and it's written by Greg Rucka with art by Michael Lark. What? That's incredible! What? And then and they're not going to sort of want to dilute that initial announcement by doing too much in one go, I would have thought. So maybe if Larry Hama is joining the fold, that maybe they delay that for a little while, let people sort of miss it, and there'd be enough time to pass that when they launch it as well, they can do another big fanfare, you know. Larry Hama returns to the universe that he created, you know, a brand new, you know, 301 or whatever they do.
Yeah, so I think that is an option. I think that is a possibility. At the same time, IDW started with a non-Hama continuity and Hama not writing the main book, and there was a lot of goodwill for that, and that was a good book. But after a couple of years, that stuff lost steam, and it was the Hama book with the old Hama continuity that sustained the license for IDW. And so I wonder if a publisher for next year looks at that kind of scenario, what you just described, and decides that it is less of a surprise or a big splash if it's like Hama is continuing his story, or Hama is starting a new story that kind of also connects with the old story, but you don't have to worry about the old story. I wonder if the focus actually will be more, no, it's Hama, it's the guy that, you know, 7,000 of you want on this old book, and let's see if we can not, it's not waste time, it's not to distract, but create additional tracks. But, you know, and then again, some of the, and I don't know how such a license, the finances of it work, but, you know, if a new publisher pays a flat fee and then also a percentage of comics published or comics sold to Hasbro, if that company publishes more G.I. Joe comics, they can pay down the flat fee faster. But if they publish fewer books and those books or that book sell more, then, you know, the percentage that they're paying in total, I don't mean as a ratio, is smaller because they're publishing less. So, and it'll depend on which publisher gets it, because, certain publishers, like, maybe a comparison right now is what Marvel is doing with Star Wars and Aliens and upcoming Predator. Marvel, when they grabbed Star Wars from Dark Horse a couple years back, there was immediately a main Star Wars book and a Darth Vader book. And then there were some additional miniseries, right? And with Aliens, initially there was just one book a year ago or 2 years ago. And it took, I think, a year for there to be a side miniseries. And I'm trying to remember if that actually took the place of the main one, right? Similarly with Predator, right? The first issue isn't out yet. But as far as I know, there's only one Predator book. It's not like the main Predator book and then Predator Savage Tales miniseries and then like Predator 1950, like a second series. And so the comics business is different in 2023 than it was when IDW started the Joe license. And I think the Joe license, it made a lot of sense to start with 3 books, but not quickly, but eventually 3 books started to be too much.
Yeah, the Aliens and Predator examples, those comics have been going a long time, mostly on Dark Horse, and I guess the tradition there is miniseries with rotating art teams. So it's slightly different to kind of the other books that you might have, like maybe Conan. So they went for a sort of ongoing Conan, didn't they, when they got back the license? But then they were also sort of spreading out into some other miniseries. But with all of these licenses coming back to Marvel, what they very quickly did was they got out some nice chunky omnibuses collecting the back matter. So if you think about the number of omnibuses that have come out for Conan, for example, so and not just the hardcover omnibuses, but also the soft cover epic collections. So what we might see is that when the license lands somewhere else, there might be a fairly speedy taking advantage of the opportunity to just get books out there without creating new content, is to have some collected material of the back matter. And given that a lot of this stuff has gone out of print, particularly the sort of Marvel, some of the Marvel volumes can be quite hard to find, that there'll probably be a fair demand for that.
Yeah, again, I go back and forth on that because, for several years when I would look up in the Diamond catalog online, all of the, quote, classic G.I. Joe volumes that were 10 issues at a time of the Marvel run that IDW had in print. For many years, they were all available. And a couple times, like volume 1 was between printings and then it came back into availability. And I think you and I are very aware of a couple people we know or see online who say something like Classic Volume 7 or whatever it is isn't available. That's the one I need. Oh, if only they'd print that again. And I think part of what IDW has been responding to in the last 5 years in doing Volume 1 again, but letting other ones go out of print, is sales velocity. And I don't know the numbers, but a $25 graphic novel collection like that they're gonna print, I don't know, 1,000 copies, 4,000 copies. The regular comics are 7,000 copies, and then a lot of Marvel and DC comics right now are selling between 10,000 copies and 60,000 copies a month. The graphic novels, that's a different thing, and they don't sell as fast. And so if it took them several years to sell down all their copies of, let's say, Classic G.I. Joe Volume 7, separate from them maybe thinking they were going to lose the license at the end of 2022, separate from that. But, a year or two ago, they might have done their math and thought, well, if we print another 1,000 copies or 4,000 copies, yes, a very small vocal minority of fans or stores that are asking for this will get it. But does that mean we're going to sell 23 copies? And then very, very slowly we sit on the other 940 or 3,940. And so the next publisher isn't getting sales data from IDW, I'm sure. But on the one hand, yes, you can make a big splash with reprints, or reprints in formats we haven't seen before. IDW did the hardcover complete collections, and they tried the omnibuses, which for IDW are smaller, like the Dark Horse omnibuses of like 2010.
Yeah,
and
or digest, yeah.
Yeah, more like digest, larger than a digest, smaller than a standard trade paperback, and each containing like 15 to 20 comics. And they did an omnibus for G.I. Joe Origins. There was the whole run in 2 volumes, and they did a G.I. Joe omnibus of the first, 15 or so issues of Marvel. And then they might have done one for the main Chuck Dixon book. But they didn't go further with that. And so the next publisher, maybe it makes sense for them to just sort of pick up what IDW was doing with the classic paperbacks at $25 and just change the IDW name to the new publisher name and just sort of continue to replicate those. Maybe it would be a different format, like, quote, epic collections like Marvel, these 500-page paperbacks at a standard trim, or, 600 to 1,300-page hardcover omnibuy like Marvel does at $100 or $125 each. A new format might grab different attention.
Yeah, for sure.
But to some extent, if the Joe fandom that buys comics isn't as big as it was in the 80s, and the next publisher rolls out a bunch of reprints, will they sell, or will they sell with a significant sales velocity? That is the cheaper way to exploit the license than to hire writers and artists to make new material. But we may be at a saturation point with some of those things, the reprints.
Interesting, yeah. I think, my suspicion would be if they mix it up enough to make a big Marvel-style omnibus or epic collection, that you'll get, there's demand there, including people who are prepared to double dip for that sort of extra collection, particularly if there's enough interesting things that make it different. My
final thought, and we should probably then talk about issue 294, and I would like to write a blog post about this later in the year. IDW's reproduction on the first 50 issues of Marvel G.I. Joe is great, because those files had been prepared before IDW got the license. Digital Chameleon, which people know as a coloring studio, did that work in 2001, 2002. I do not like the reproduction that IDW has done on issues 60 through 155. And I don't like it for special missions, and I don't like it for the yearbooks. It looks like to me that IDW scanned printed comic books, stripped the color, and then when I say recolor, I don't mean with new modern colors, changing the colors. I mean recreating the original colors, but with computer printing, which is how things are printed now. And IDW's reprint department had a budget every time it rolled out the next volume of classic G.I. Joe, volume 6, volume 7, and files got lost, or original artwork isn't as accessible as it once was. But whoever has the license for next year, they can do a different job, and their reproduction of issues 51 through 155, plus all the special missions, can be superior. The black plate, the actual line work, is a little crunchy in almost all of the IDW reprints, which is why, though we have them at my store, I'm torn on carrying them.
Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hammer writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa. Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hammer writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa.
Okay, let's get on into issue 294, released just this week at time of recording on 29th of June. So the creative team are the standard team that we have been used to the last few issues. Writer, as always, Larry Hammer. Artist, SL Gallant. Inks, Maria Keane. Colours, Jay Brown. Letters, Neil Utake. Group editor, Tom Waltz. And research specialist, Diana Davis.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Cover A is the fourth of five by Freddie Williams II, with color by Fariza Kamaputra, and this one works pretty well by itself. Destro and Zorana, their giant heads and shoulders loom large in the background. Shipwreck, Duke, Jinx, someone, Gung
Shooter,
Ho.
maybe.
Shooter was black. This woman has light skin. Yeah, who is that? It's the person between Jinx and Gung Ho. Is that Mayday from the Devil's Due run?
I very much doubt it.
She does look like that character. Brown hair, sort of a bluish, grayish costume.
Because I think I asked before about a similar looking character on the last set of covers. Because I think there was a character that was meant to be Shooter that appeared on that last set of covers.
Really?
Yeah, not the last set in front of the Statue of Liberty. It was the previous one.
What's the number?
It's 285. Just to the left of Gung Ho, there was a character that I think we talked about at the time as well, fairly nondescript, and I think that was meant to be Shooter.
Oh. Well, this does look like that person. But isn't Shooter black?
Again, the colour's not quite so clear on that one, but yeah. Lighting, let's call it. Let's call it somewhat
Joey.
reflective lighting.
Okay, so the action figure. Yeah, she came in a 3-pack with. Is that not true? Yeah, she came in a 3-pack. It was the 50th around then. She comes with Night Force Falcon and Night Force Outback in the 25th anniversary body.
I don't think I ever realised that figure existed. There's a collector's club cover.
G.I. Joe Classified? Was that the miniseries, or was it? It was Declassified.
Declassified. I've just found a cover that. So it looks like the Shooter as appears on the collector's club issue, October 2016. Who is Jodie Shooter Craig, and the accompanying, I guess, figure that was kind of trying to spotlight the G.I. Joe 50th anniversary Shooter, sort of one of the same, and a sort of a dark costume. And that figure does come with that kind of same silenced pistol that appears on the front cover that we were looking at. So, yeah, it does. I think my conclusion would be that it would be Shooter, but with sort of not quite hitting the right color tones on the skin
or the costume, because the whole idea behind the 3-issue Devil's Due Declassified miniseries was that this was a mission before issue 1, where they're all in green. And I'm looking at a page from Declassified issue 3 with Shooter, and she's got this costume, but it's green. So the person on the cover to 294, cover A, the costume is a very, very light blue. That's why it to me looks like the Devil's Due Mayday. Anyway, it's a nice cover. And then cover B, which is my preference because this does depict the issue to some extent. It's divided in half. There's a black background on the top half of the cover. Snake Eyes as Don Marino in costume with a machine gun and a sword in an exciting legs splayed, getting ready to attack pose. And then as a mirror image of the pose, as if the bottom half of the cover is a sort of reflection in a puddle, is the original Snake Eyes version 2 costume with Uzi and sword. And the bottom half of the cover it's not a lake or a puddle. It is a white circle sort of spotlight with the Arashikaje logo. And Dawn is on the top half is colored sort of normal, but like nighttime with blues. And then on the bottom, Snake Eyes is he's all black, but anything that would be gray or silver is knocked out in red. And I was wondering, is this the first time, or it's certainly one of the few times we've seen SL Gallant draw Snake Eyes version 2 specifically?
Good question. Yeah.
We've seen some flashbacks, and there was that whole bit where Throwdown Snake Eyes, Sean, got a new costume, but that is a Snake Eyes costume, but that's not specifically version 2.
Earlier on in the IDW run, I think Snake Eyes was kind of going around in his version 2 costume. So if you think about the likes of cover issue 170, where he's in that dojo, sort of kneeling in front of a sword with ninjas behind him. That's the version 2. So yeah, I think he must have drawn him a fair bit while he was using that costume again.
Okay.
Yeah, SL Gallant sort of had quite often a preference for drawing characters in like their most classic, iconic kind of costumes, and because they weren't promoting the toys, they had a bit more leeway to choose which costume they decided to kind of feature.
And then cover RI, retailer incentive, stores had to order 10 copies. For every 10 copies of covers A and B combined, a comic book store ordered, they were allowed to order 1 copy of this 1 in 10 retailer incentive cover. And it's got Sherlock lunging with a pistol, shooting at 2 cobras, and behind her is a big American flag, and she's got her metal arm up, and she's using it to deflect some bullets. And the color in this, this is John Royal and Jagdish Kumar, with colors by James Afraidy. The background color is a little unusual in that it's sort of orange and yellow and green and brown, and so it is evocative without being specific. You know, I get the sense that this is somewhere, but I don't quite know. You know, jungle, field. You know, nighttime, daytime. Is the sky blotted out by fiery smoke everywhere? But that's not a weakness. It's just evocative. I like this drawing a lot. I like Sherlock as a character. I like this pose. I really do like the color on this cover. But as per usual, since it has nothing to do with the issue, it's not a good fit for me, because you know it should be it should be Scarlet, and it doesn't have to have casino stuff, you know, or it should be Jinx, or it should be Helix, because they're in the issue. It could even be Rock and Roll, who's in one panel.
It's quite evocative of a almost superhero pose, I thought.
Yeah,
It's almost like she's sort of flying, and with the bullets bouncing off her arm, that's kind of a bit like Superman, you know, pinging those bullets off of his chest. So it's a bit unusual from that kind of perspective.
Yes, it is much more, good point, it's much more of a superhero cover than we tend to see on G.I. Joe. There is this little reminder for me that there's a funny redundancy in Sherlock's costume where her hat says police federal agent and her armor says police federal agent. And I'm okay with Cobra Commander having a cobra symbol on his forehead and a cobra symbol on his chest, but you know, if Law had a big MP armband and a giant like MP on his shirt and a giant MP on his helmet, it might be too much.
Yeah, maybe that cap needs a logo on it rather than the same wording multiple times. And let's just call out John Royal back on covers. His next few are kind of lined up in the previews as well. So you know, after a long run, he's had a few issues off, but back again. But always nice to see a Royal cover, because it does make for a very dynamic image. In the service section of the Cobra Casino, Dawn and Helix take down a rampaging casino bot, but then stumble into a whole room full of them. Alpha 000001 activates the sleeper bots with a kill-on-sight order. Dawn and Helix escape onto the casino floor, expecting the bots will not attack them in front of the guests. They then head back to their room to gear up, battling another bot on the way. Meanwhile, Jinx is still stuck in Mindbender's lab, where everyone's favourite dentist observes that Genghis Khan's personality is taking over in his latest Serpentor project. Helix and Dawn reunite with Scarlet and Snake Eyes and do battle with the reinforced platoon of casino bots in the hotel corridor. A Techno Viper alerts Mindbender to the bellhop bat situation and the quandary that security alarms have been suppressed. They find the footage of the corridor fight. Mindbender spots Snake Eyes and gleefully instructs Laura to recapture him so he can be plugged into the scanner to be reprogrammed in his latest scheme. "You can count on me, Dr. Mindbender," she says with determination. To be continued. So, talking points. Before we would normally get straight into our high level takeaways and such. And I found myself getting a little bit of a moaning mini vibe going on, finding the negative. So I decided to start things positive. And to remind myself to be positive, I actually even made a song about it.
Well, I done read a heck a lot of comics. Some of them are great, the team are all on it, but some are a bit cack. They really are whack. Before the nitpicks come out, I'll giving it my bestest, and nothing's gonna stop me from trying to be positive. So I'll pause my scorn to put up 2 thumbs and turn my frown upside down. Take advice, it cannot wait. Say something nice. I'll say something nice.
So,
Man, it's a whole song. It's so heartfelt. For listeners who only listen to the episodes with Mark and I talking about the Hama series, you may not know that I can get pretty grumpy about the Devil's Due issues of G.I. Joe. And when Mark unveiled this new jingle to me, I thought, well, that's definitely for our Devil's Due episodes with our co-host, Jay Cordray. I don't know that it'll convince me to behave differently when we record. I'm curious, what moaning mini stuff was jumping out at you?
So you got me moaning it straight away, Tim. That's the whole point of the jingle. Is we're meant to be positive. So
right, well,
I'm going to start with my positives.
Okay, you start with your positive, and then I'll start with my positive.
So my positive was that Gallant is often sort of not taking the easy option in some of the sort of the drawings that he's been doing, and there's some quite cool sort of shots that he he's working hard and he's working against a deadline. So he's sort of getting through these pages, but he's still investing the time to make them pop and introduce some extra fun things. So a couple of things that I noticed was this panel in Mindbender's lab where he's looking at Genghis Khan, where Genghis has got this beard that's grown, and he's talking about the personality sort of being dominant, and we're sort of looking through the Bacta tank, as we've been calling it, in the green, and getting all of this great distortion of Mindbender and his moustache and Laura in the background there. So I enjoyed seeing that little detail coming through in the art. And on a similar note, later on, when Helix is looking through the little, what would you call it, the peepee hole on the coattail door? Is there a name for that?
Peephole.
Peephole, yeah. The peephole on the hotel door, and she sees all of these bellhop bats sort of with the fisheye kind of curvature on them as they're kind of coming towards the door. I thought that was a great little touch that sort of made that a fun sequence. And my other sort of positive, which I'm sure we'll want to expand on, is that there's a lot of big action sequences in this, and compared to some of the other issues that we've had more recently, that there seems like there's a lot of big extended action and fight sequences, and those have been done sort of very dynamically and quite cool. So that's me in my positive nutshell. What about you, Tim?
I'm going to reiterate one of your positive nutshell pieces of nut. Shannon Gallant is great at fight choreography, and I selfishly want him to stay on G.I. Joe because he always does such a great job, and this is a book that needs someone of his caliber, of his skill. But separate from the sort of the range of old-fashioned to modern and hotness of his style, any editor at any publisher who has a lot of action, superhero, grounded, horror, fight book, would be lucky to get an artist who can pose a variety of characters in a busy page, right? These pages tend to have 5 or 6 panels. And I mean, just let me just rattle off some descriptions of poses, right? Page 2, Helix is on her side, getting ready to sort of scissor her ankles past each other to trip up this killer robot, while the killer robot is lunging forward, bending down the way that a marathon runner or a sprint runner leans forward so their head crosses the finish line a little faster, but having swung its arms backward with swords pointing out, while Jinx is up in the air with her knees tucked up under her, almost under her chin. Then I jump to a couple pages later, and this fire-breathing killer robot in a sort of battle stance, and then down the hall in the distance, Jinx with her her torso twisted to the right, her arms sort of out, caution at the ready, her feet, her ankles splayed. And then in the next panel, we're looking down from the ceiling, and Gallant does this a lot, where he puts an element in the extreme foreground to create depth. So he's not just drawing a character 5 feet away from us and then a wall 6 feet away from us, right? This panel on page 4, panel 2, we're looking down past this sort of horizontal ceiling girder pipe, right? So that Helix can shoot the sprinkler system or just a pipe, right? We're looking down. Gallant is constantly swinging his camera around, high, medium, low. His poses are all exciting and dynamic. He's not repeating poses, and he's not using like stock poses. I mean, there are artists who draw really sexy, hot, detailed, dynamic comics who cannot pull off a fight scene as interesting as this. And Gallant is also like a good example is the first panel of page 3, where we're now looking past Helix with the pistol. We can't see Helix's head because of the hat. The water's pouring down, and then in the middle ground is the killer robot, and then in the distance, all the way in the top corner of the panel, is Jinx. And Jinx has now jumped down and landed on the ground. This whole panel it's acting like a diagonal panel, right? Because the window that we're looking into to see this reality is a rectangle, right? But the whole angle of what we're seeing is at a diagonal. And this is what the G.I. Joe comic book requires. And this is what readers, I think, whether they realize it or not, want someone who can pull this off. And it is dynamic and exciting, and all of the acting is great, and then another 2 pages later, when we're the big sort of 2/3 splash panel reveal of the big corridor, the big room with all of the killer robots and all of their sort of Borg stasis pods. And then the sort of like Terminator moment where they all turn on, right? Whir, the sound effect is WHIRRRRRR, whir. And there are 2 hands in the foreground that are colored sort of a brown, orange, purple to show that that's Jinx and Helix sort of reacting in surprise, right? And then this final panel where Jinx says, "Oop," and she has her sort of index finger to her chin like she's thinking, and Helix has her 4 fingers up to her lower lip as if she's a little concerned, right? That is not a boring panel. It's not a flashy panel, but Jinx is leaning forward.
Dawn.
Thank you. Right. Have I been saying Jinx? Right. Jinx is back. Sorry,
I'm not
Jinx
too
is
sure
back in,
how long through this you've been saying Jinx.
Jinx is, excuse me, everyone. Jinx is back in, this is why I want the Joes in their costumes. The person in red is Jinx. Jinx is back in Mindbender's lab overhearing Mindbender and Laura's conversation.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And thank you. Dawn is in here fighting with Helix against the killer robot, and then Dawn and Helix stumble onto the big corridor of many, many killer robots. So in this final panel on page 4, 5, 6, 7, Dawn says "Oop" and is leaning forward with her finger at her chin, and Helix is also like leaning sort of over toward us, the reader, the camera, with one hand up and one arm down. They're both twisting their spines. The camera is at 4 feet looking up at them, right? That is not a boring panel. And a lot of artists would draw that as a boring, flat panel.
Very good, Tim. So now, after all of that positivity, shall I get into my negativity?
Yeah.
So I think my negativity is coming from a place and a frustration that maybe the plot is just not quite moving forward fast enough, because I want to know what happens next. And if I already had the next issue in hand, or was reading this in a trade paperback, then maybe I might enjoy it more, because I would know that I wouldn't have to wait. And that sort of sense of it maybe not moving forward quite as fast as I'd like is sort of born, I guess, as well as a sense of deja vu. I mentioned deja vu last time as well, and just to give you a kind of a flavour of why I'm feeling that, we've got Dawn and Helix fighting casino bots again, as happened in a previous issue, but also in sort of the cliffhanger to the last one. Dawn is still in Mindbender's lab waiting for a diversion, as was the case last issue. Laura and Mindbender are still in Mindbender's lab talking about the Serpentor project and the need to capture Snake Eyes, as has happened across all of the last 4 issues. And Scarlet and Sean are still on the roof with the aircon units, as happened last issue. And maybe, it's mean to nitpick any one of those things, but sort of combined together, it just feels there's just a sense of too much of a kind of a retread and sort of just not propelling us quickly enough as I'd like to find out the next big thing in the story. Does that kind of sound fair to you?
Yeah, and I don't think referring to any one of these 4 or 5 story elements that hasn't changed much in an issue or 4, I don't think it's nitpicking. I think it's commenting. Nitpicking is me saying, I wish the center piece of the sunglasses that Jinx and Helix are wearing, the thing that actually sits on the bridge of your nose that connects the 2 things that are in front of your eyeballs, that line is rarely inked in this issue. That's a nitpick. But saying that, this is now the 3rd issue in 5 issues where 2 of the Joes are fighting a killer robot, and I think that is a fair criticism. I'm not keeping the current issues sort of in my brain, in my data banks, as much as you are. And I'm not skimming or rereading the last issue or a couple issues ago right before I read the new issue. I mean, I love G.I. Joe, and I want to, marinate in it and think about it and study it so that I can make comparisons. But, I only have so much time to read comics. There's so many comics to read. So I tend to read an issue of G.I. Joe and take notes and then move on. And so I'm not remembering, in our previous episode, you pointed out the redundancy that Dawn and Helix had fought one of these robots just a few issues earlier, and I had already forgotten that. And that's my deficiency as a G.I. Joe comics podcaster. But I don't mind so much that this stuff is moving slowly or repeating in and of itself. What is worrisome to me is that there are so few issues left, and each of these issues needs to really count. And no one's ever going to do this, but I feel like when a series as complex as this is given only a few issues to wrap up, I feel like, no, it's not the final issue that should be double-sized. It's all of the final issues that should be double-sized. And I'm trying to remember I think there were some examples at Marvel in the 2000s. I think there were some issues of The Ultimates or The Ultimates 2 by Mark Millar and Brian Hitch. And there were some other comics along the way where the writer and artist their story would get a little bigger, and they would ask editorial for an extra page or 2. Mm-hmm. And editorial would say yes. And sometimes that meant they would drop a letters page, and sometimes that meant that they would drop, I think, an in-house ad for some other Marvel book, or maybe some ad for candy or some movie, which means less revenue. And I'm not talking about double-sized issues or oversized issues where it's announced ahead of time. I mean, you're paying for a 22-page comic and you get a 23-page comic. You get 23 pages, 7 pages of ads, not 8. And when I have been reading these issues, particularly with no letters page, I've thought, I wish someone would ask. I wish Hama or the artist would say to the editor, can we have an extra page? And then, the editor would say, well, let me check my budget. Like, well, okay, we can't do this every other issue.
Mm.
In an episode that you might not have heard yet, dear listeners, Chiefy Two Shoes, who founded this very podcast, and I and Mark were talking about Cobra stuff.
This is our special Cobra Convergence episode, which will be the episode airing after this one.
And at the end of it, he asked Mark and I what our predictions for issue 300 were. And I'm certain I will like issue 300, but I already know it's not going to be long enough for my tastes. I think it needs to be triple sized. And, IDW is definitely not going to do one of these 100-page comics that's stapled, or one of their sort of spiral bound double or triple sized issues, the way that the 2012 G.I. Joe annual was, with the Crimson Guardsmen marching on the front.
Mm-hmm.
But I want a big fight and a lot of resolution, even if Hama has already promised us on Facebook that there'll be some cliffhanger. So my overall takeaway for this issue was the action is great. I was having some nagging in the back of my mind that Jinx is still hiding in the lab, and Mindbender and Laura are still talking about Serpentor. But this issue made up for the last issue being such a fast read and such a sort of transition issue. But I wish we could take the couple of pages of the tourists getting to Cobra Island from the last issue, and then the Joes doing their recon with the air conditioning and their disguises, with hats and sunglasses, and this fight.
Mm-hmm. Condense it down.
Yeah, I like how big this fight was with the robots. This sort of half this issue was this fight, which was really satisfying. And I don't want it to be shorter, but what if the previous issue, instead of having 3 pages of setup for the robot showdown,
less jitney,
and then was the final page of the last issue sort of a full page of the robot breathing fire and the two Joes saying, uh-oh, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Take that out, because, that's not all that different from the first page of this issue, which is a fire-breathing robot attacking these two Joes.
It's a cliffhanger for the beginning of this issue.
Yeah.
And last time you said, ooh, next issue, maybe it's going to be aftermath of the fight, or maybe it's going to be bang straight into the fight. And either of those things will be good.
Yes, and in fact, we didn't quite rewind 20 seconds for the first page of this issue to the last issue, but effectively. So in and of itself, I like this issue a lot. But yes, in a run of issues, it really last issue needed to be double-sized, half of it and half of this needed to be sort of dropped and mushed together.
Mm. I thought, I did like the action in this scene. I thought in this issue it was done well. There was a big opening fight, as you say, great fight choreography, and the issue did begin with a single page splash. Ideally, it would have had the name of the story and the little creator box down there as well, but I do love an opening splash as a first page. So I had some observations about some of the stuff that happens in this fighting. We want to sort of get into some of that.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of the like the armored faceplate played a big part of the choreography, and sort of having a weakness of in the robot. So going into target acquisition, and it's popping up, and they're trying to get a hit in there, and then it's popping back down again before shooting her in the face. Great. So what do you think of that as a storytelling tool, storytelling device for kind of the bot?
I liked it, and also it was in keeping with 50 issues ago when the Joes were fighting the Blue Ninjas and found that the heads were the weak point.
Yeah, just when they're leaning their heads back, sort of just getting in the neck and stuff. I was a little bit disappointed in that fight that there wasn't really much again about Helix's mum's fighting style. Do you remember in that previous issue when the last time they'd encountered this casino bot, Betty, the casino bot? Helix noticed that somehow they knew her mum's sort of fighting style, so they've not yet properly followed up with that.
That's the cliffhanger for issue 300. the head blue ninja is actually Felix's mom.
Tim, what are you on to here? Crikey.
Going back to you liking and also me liking the fight choreography, the bit where they start fighting in the elevator, that's great. That, for a second I thought, oh no, now the Joes are backed into a corner because they're in this really small space, and this sharp, dangerous robot that can move fast and is armored, and maybe it can't shoot fire anymore because it got doused, or maybe we're just sort of moving past that. But the two Joes dispatch the robot. Then what? Slam it hard. Done. Thump. Right? What the? Says the civilian on the outside of the elevator doors, which have just closed, and this sword sticks through the elevator door, sticking out at him, and then the elevator goes up, and then the sword goes up, and then on the next page, the robot's arm gets torn off as the sword sort of hits the horizontal structure that separates one floor to the next. That's really fun. And then similarly, this sort of smartness, like I would never write a great fight choreography scene in a comic. I've never really tried, but I would need to do 5 or 10 to get sort of to a modicum of interest and satisfaction for the reader. And this bit here where the elevator has moved up, the robot's arm has been torn off, and then right the moment later, Dawn. I'm so sorry, listeners. Dawn punches the light in the ceiling of the elevator, right? Lights out. Let's see if it can target in the dark. But it's doing that so that the robot has to raise up its, fake eyes so that there's this, and then she can shoot it point blank in the face with her pistol, right? Like, that's great. And again, just going back to how exciting a page is to look at, this page where they get to where they're inside the elevator, page 13, right? 1, 2, it's 6 panels. And the panel 2, I guess technically it's 5 panels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 panels acting as 6 panels. Panel 2, where Helix is finishing grabbing her pistol and saying, then what? And the robot is swinging upward and matching the diagonal of the sort of speed lines of the background color, and sort of your eyes follow a Z shape when you read panels 1 to 2 to 3, which is a traditional comics device that you don't always have to do, but it can be nice. But, Dawn up in the air on the top right, and then coming back down with the white background, and then the poses in this page are great. And if you want to practice drawing comics, just look at this page. Don't worry about whether it's G.I. Joe or not. Don't worry about whether you're drawing G.I. Joe or not, or G.I. Joe fan art, or G.I. Joe fan fiction, or recreating a G.I. Joe page. Just forget G.I. Joe. This is 3 people having a fight in an elevator. And just sketch out very quickly, if you want to practice drawing, the perspective of the backgrounds, right? The floor plane, the wall planes, and the ceiling plane, and the actual poses of these characters, right? And you will realize how much work Gallant is doing in keeping this interesting and in moving it along.
Yeah, imagine drawing a fight in an elevator is not necessarily something that an artist who is not confident would like to hear.
Yeah.
The one that we were talking about that they fought in the elevator, that was a kind of a plant tending bot. So immediately before they start fighting her, she's filling up a vase with, or vase, as I'd say, with some like red roses. And then sort of over her shoulder, she's noticing Helix and Dawn walking past. And then that sort of leads to her.
Yeah, you're talking about the middle panel of page 12.
Yeah. So nice subtle detail that I hadn't really picked up on my first reading.
And that may be in Hama's plot, but we know that Gallant spends time with even the less exciting acting poses, like that the panel you're talking about, panel 3 on page 12, there are 3 different Cobra Casino actual Blue Ninja robots. One on the far left, one in the middle, tending 2 roses, and one on the far right. And they're all looking at the 2 women Joes. And then what does Gallant do, right? He also has 2 casino goers posing for a selfie. And then he's got different, they're relatively similar, but different acting and body language for the 2 Joes, right? They're looking at each other. So one's facing left, one's facing right. Their hands are up, their arms are up in different ways, even though both are sort of the like shorthand for like, what do you mean? Let me explain. Let's go over here. There's another casino goer in a red cap with a to-go coffee cup. There's a little trash can under the elevator, up-down button. There's some kind of like no smoking sign above that. There's a second set of flowers on a push cart that presumably is what the robot you're referring to is drawing from. And then in the background on the left, there are slot machines with a 4th robot that is looking in this direction. And then way in the distance, there's someone at those, let's say, video slot machines, right? That's a huge amount of information for the least interesting panel in this issue. In terms of sort of the reader. I don't mean in terms of story, right? Like this panel is hugely important because they're watching them. They all see them, right? That's when it gets fun and the stakes go up. That's when the stakes get high, you might say. That's when it sort of gets, creepy. Oh no, they're all watching us. We're not going to get out of here. There are artists who might draw G.I. Joe stories that take place in the snowy mountains and in ancient tombs, and all they have to draw are a couple lines to separate sky and snow, and the colorist can do all the work, and the catacombs or the tunnel under the snowy mountains, just a couple of lines, and then the colorist can do all the work to make the background texture stone lit by torch or in shadow. Or you could draw a page like this with a panel like this, and you get paid the same whether you draw a panel with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 6 humans and 4 robots, and all of this casino stuff that reinforces to the reader we are in the casino, right?
Or you can get paid the same for all of that, or just 2 talking heads with a blank background that gets knocked out in one color.
Or sort of something in the middle, right? Like let's say we sort of cropped out the left third. Let's say you just sort of had the flowers, the robot tending to them but looking at the Joes. You didn't draw the other flowers and the tray, the cart, because you don't need that, but it definitely helps. 1 elevator, not 2. You drop out the other guy, you drop out the other robot, right? You could go halfway and it would still be helpful and do some work. And so when Gallant reinforces where they are, it's like they're no longer in the not the sewer. Where were they? Where the fight happened in the first couple pages?
They were like on, what did we call it? Like a service tunnel.
Okay.
And then they went out onto the main casino floor.
So Gallant very clearly, turn to page 1, dear listener. Gallant lays out everything you need in the background of page 1. There are puddles on the ground. There are pipes in the ceiling. There are pipes in the walls. There's a electrical breaker box on the wall.
And a video camera on the ceiling.
Oh, yeah. Which I'm going to guess is in Hama's plot. And this lays the groundwork so that Gallant doesn't have to draw any background for pages 2 and 3. And that's okay. I mean, this issue was a rush job, and I'm sure he would have liked to do a little bit of background work for pages 2 and 3, but it's not unclear. I'm not losing where we are. And I get lost in some comic book fights when artists aren't pulling up their half of the bargain. And then the first panel of page 4, what does Gallant do? He reestablishes the background, right? They haven't teleported to the moon, right? It's still that same service tunnel. So there's pipes, and there's that electrical panel, which needs to be established so that Dawn can jump up and yank the cords from it, right? And so as these two Joes move from the access tunnel to the Borg hallway with all of the rows of evil casino robots, like all plugged into their stasis pods, right? And then and there's even a transition panel where these two Joes are going from that access tunnel through this doorway that says recharging and maintenance, right? And then the second panel, this sort of 2/3 page splash panel where we do see all of these women robots in these two rows against the walls, right? The two Joes are still coming out of that doorway. So Gallant doesn't draw that doorway once, he draws it twice. He doesn't draw the breaker box. He doesn't set it up once before Dawn uses it. He sets it up twice before Dawn uses it. And then when they transition from that lab to the sort of main casino floor, we see them going through a doorway that says main casino floor. And that's not like hitting me over the head with it. That's not treating me as dumb. That's being clear. Mm-hmm. Whether or not the door's labeled, just the fact that they're going from that sort of lab with all the robots to, and so here we are, right? On the first panel of page 10, what's on the far left? 1.5 video slot machines with chairs, and then some wall and the doorway, right? And Jay Brown separates the two, right? The color in that space that's deep with all the robots, that's blue. And then the color out here in the main casino floor is yellow, beige. It is a rectangular panel, right? It's not like a parallelogram panel of like Wolverine or Ripclaw slashing from some X-Men or Cyberforce comic from 1994. But the perspective of this panel is all skewed diagonally to add some urgency, to make it exciting, even though it's just two Joes, not sprinting, not fleeing, but very quickly getting out of that space and coming through the doorway. So, you draw comics, you establish where your characters are geographically, and then a panel or a page later, you got to reestablish it. And then if they go to the next place, you can't do it with just narration or dialogue, right? That's a problem, or that's lazy. So you show them moving from one space to another.
Yeah, and there's no, with the exception of when we cut to Revenge Robotics in New Jersey, Hackensack, there isn't little caption boxes in the corners of any of these things saying back in this location, but because the background and the characters and the colouring all clearly establishes where we are. There's green tubes, we're back in Mindbender's lab, where there's purple background with lots of wires and stuff. We're back in Revanche's HQ. It's sort of the more yellow lighting. You were back in the casino floor. There's HVAC units. We're on the roof. There's
outside.
Yeah, outside on the roof. There's glowing purple buildings. And foliage. We're in the jungle surrounding. Just outside the casino. So yeah, very well and comfortably done by the team, both in terms of art, inks, pencils, and colors, working to get all together to all sort of pull to sort of make it very clear, that sense of place as we're sort of cutting between scenes without needing to sort of knock us over the head with extra caption boxes.
And Hama does in G.I. Joe, Marvel G.I. Joe and IDW G.I. Joe, he does, when we cut from scene to scene, have often on the top left, a very small caption box that says, back in Switzerland, Cobra Island, back in Trussel Abysmia. And I never feel like that is lazy or cheating or making up for deficient art and storytelling. I think that's just being extra clear when he forgets to, doesn't even have to, or the art is so, I mean this in a good way, dense and busy that he wouldn't want to, as happens in this issue. It's even better. I also wouldn't mind, but I don't need like back in the jungle across from the hotel, back on the roof.
Now I was beginning to get to this, then I got distracted by that lift sequence. So something that threw me a little bit, or made me think that's a bit strange, was at the end. Sorry,
when you say lift, you mean elevator, right?
So elevator,
okay.
Yeah. Is lift not something that you would use generally? No,
not so much.
Okay. So at the end of that initial fight with the bots with the missing head, sing with the smoke and the sparks and the Helix says, "We'd best police up the brass and get out of Dodge." And Dawn agrees. "The fewer traces we leave behind, the better." We've probably been already picked up on by the security cameras. There's a security camera up there on the ceiling pointing down at them with a red flashing dot. Best to keep our hat brims low and boogie. So is picking up their sort of shell casings off of the floor, is that pressing, given the amount of noise and explosions that has been caused? And they got a robot sort of missing a head that they're leaving in situ, and they're on video. Seems a bit weird that that's high on their list of priorities.
I had the same thought. I'm going to allow it because it allows Hama to include what I think you would call a Hamaism, where they're picking up their shell casings, which is a realistic military action, and then therefore a G.I. Joe realistic action in a G.I. Joe story. And so it lends some authenticity to this scene, even if in the moment they're actually too busy or they've blown their cover too much for it to be helpful. But I think they're being optimistic. I think maybe just that's what it is. Anything they can do to maintain their cover, for another 2 minutes. In terms of the noise of fighting in an exploding robot head, if you're in a concrete tunnel 10 feet over from the main casino floor, we might not hear that. These things are built to keep, the casino's going to have a big stage where like Cirque du Soleil or a rock band is going to perform, or, there's all this noise coming from the main casino floor, and not that far away are the closest hotel rooms. So I don't know that there's extra sound insulation in this kind of building, but there is sound insulation. And maybe because it's Cobra, there's extra sound insulation because these crazy labs are right there. I don't know how loud it is to make a new Serpentor when you're, 20 feet from some of the gambling equipment.
And another sort of point of confusion for me, or just sort of maybe a pondering point for me, is that these bots are sort of upgraded in some ways. They've got all of these fighting capabilities that were sort of elaborated in previous issues. But in some other ways, they seem quite downgraded versus other bats or revanche robots that we've seen before. In particular around, there doesn't seem to be much of a hive mind. So they're sort of all operating autonomously, but then sort of being directed from the center by Alpha 1. Did you pick up on that? So they sort of, there isn't that immediate kind of awareness from one robot to the other of what's going on. It's only when the revanche team picks up from the footage what's going on, and then he wants to activate them and send an order to them that they pick up on that, and they have that alert, find and destroy kind of thing coming to them.
That was a tickle in the back of my mind that I couldn't put my finger on after the two Joes dispatched the one killer robot, why the other killer robots didn't know immediately, when I feel like we have seen that behavior with the Blue Ninjas. I'm going to no prize that away by saying, with Revanche infiltrating the Cobra Casino, this isn't a Blue Ninja. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's an upgrade, but it still has to look like a human. It has to act like a human. Mm-hmm. As much killing equipment as you can fit before it converts into its killer mode, from cocktail waitress. Whereas with a Blue Ninja robot, it's already the killer robot. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's less space for, the hardware that's going to connect it to the hive mind, or maybe in making it, infiltrating Dr. Mindbender's order. I don't mean his sort of status quo. I mean his purchase order. Sort of the best that the what's the zero Alpha 001, the best that it could do with what Mindbender had already started to build or had already taken delivery of or whatever, was these autonomous killer cocktail waitress robots that don't have the hive mind.
Yeah, that they're sort of described as sort of a special type of bat that Revanche have kind of upgraded for Cobra, and perhaps that Revanche couldn't get away with having them with a hive mind, but they could get away with kind of the monitoring and kind of backdoor overtaking their controls, which is less, I guess, more of a background kind of spyware, malware function that they've installed, but less of a active at all time kind of process that would be running if they were a hive mind. There we go. Yeah. That's a good no prize. And this is a final sort of quibble from me. Is Dr. Mindbender just a little deluded in expecting Laura to capture Snake Eyes given past experience? So, Snake Eyes is, basically a super ninja, undefeatable kind of character. Laura did somehow catch him last time, but she also let him escape last time when she was on sentry duty, trying to keep him locked up, and got bamboozled by some finger nuts.
Yeah, I was a little thrown by that third to last panel of the whole issue. I have complete faith in you, Laura. I know you're up to the challenge. You can do this, can't you? I know it's Mindbender's side project to capture Snake Eyes, right? Because it's not Cobra Commander's goal to capture Snake Eyes, is it?
Yeah, I don't think Cobra Commander knows about it. Yeah.
Right, okay. So, but this is, Hama has so many interesting one-of-a-kind Cobra agents at his disposal who aren't showing up. And, when they could show up in Snake Hunt, I feel like none of them did anything particular.
Mm.
The Dreadnoks all showed up, but they were all there, and they all kind of said and did the same thing. There wasn't even really... So, Scrap Iron, Major Blood, Copperhead... even later characters that Hama's not going to use, like, Gristle or the Headman. There should be... I mean, we have it in Laura. We have a unique character. And certainly in the legions of all these soldiers and vipers, it's interesting to take their helmet off, give them something identifying like a Scarface, or an eye patch, Laura. Give them a name, Fred the Seventh, and have them be particular and unique so that they're in charge of, a dozen or 100 other soldiers or vipers. But it's a scene like this, and in the previous issue where Cobra Commander shows up and interrupts Mindbender, where I really want to see Tomax and Zaymot, who are on the cover of the next issue, right? The 5-part cover that doesn't have anything to do with the story, where there are other levels of hierarchy, command, and security. And I feel like Cobra Commander and Mindbender are doing the entire casino operation themselves, with a bunch of bats and various kinds of vipers. And, in an episode that our listeners may not have heard yet, you refer to Voltar and all of the particular things he does in an issue or two of Special Missions, and issue 92, where he's commanding this, sub-contingent of Cobra in a faraway land. And that's because there was a new action figure and Hama had to use that character. And then later on, Hama stopped using that character. And Mindbender is definitely doing some mad scientist stuff here. And I don't know, he's smart enough to sort of manage the construction of a mad scientist lab and a casino. Then it's a real casino, right? It's a front, but it's not cardboard. They're not like flat stand-ups. It's actual gaming machines. But I really need to see one or two other characters here. And, I feel like if this was in the 70s, the issue 70s, it would be Zartan. It's like, Laura, Zartan's going to watch over you. Or Zartan, Laura, figure out a way to capture Snake Eyes. And then you can have some contrast or some conflict, right? Because, Zartan would not trust Laura, or he'd want to take revenge on Snake Eyes, or, Laura would... I feel like it's too open. There's too much room for Laura to see Snake Eyes and immediately have her moral quandary. I'm going to let this guy go again. And there isn't enough tension. and I have felt this way for 100 issues, that Hama uses Cobra Commander and Dr. Mindbender, but there isn't enough fun interaction with other Cobra agents. And I really want someone here, sort of in this scene, or helping or hindering with the Snake Eyes, Serpentor, and Casino stuff. And, you know, there's so many characters in G.I. Joe. I don't need much, like 2 panels with Tomax and Zaymot managing some of the Casino stuff with kind of a throwaway line of dialogue. Like, well, Commander, the next shipment of iron girders is here. Excellent. Begin construction on the south wing, you know? Or something funny. It's like, Tomax, Zaymot, where have you been? Were you playing tennis again? It's like, of course, Commander. We have to keep fit. Right? It's like...
But where have they been? Where have you been, Tomax and Zaymot? I haven't seen you so long.
Do you remember the last time we saw them?
I don't know. They must have cropped up in... Did they crop up in Snake Hunt at some point?
I don't remember.
There was there was that big... what was the name of that big crossover where they had the special immediately before it?
Cobra World Order.
Yes. I think back in Cobra World Order they appeared at one point. But I've not read that for a little while. I have to go back and I suspect it might have been then that we last saw them, when there was a whole bunch of you know, cool cameos from across the various Cobra characters. But
listeners, tell us how wrong we are. What the Tomax and Zaymot did in Snake Hunt and all the other times they've been here since Phil Jimenez's amazing connecting covers for like 223, 224, 225 with Tomax and Zaymot. I think some of what I'm seeing here with Mindbender is Hama using his favorite characters and not using characters he doesn't want to use. But I also would like him to take the opportunity. You know, there are a bunch of Cobra agents who aren't dead, and they're not... I will admit I have forgotten. Right now, in the status quo of the Real American Hero continuity, where and how is Major Blood?
Yeah.
Because I know that way back in 57, what's the cover with Lady Jane, Flint, and Destro side by side with Destro? 57. Is that when... I haven't read these issues in a while. Is that when Major Blood is captured in Destro's castle for betraying someone?
He's pretending to be Destro to gain access to some plans, and then Destro comes back from being thought to be dead, and they end up in a bit of a fisticuffs on the ground, and they're like, "Oh, who's the real Destro? I don't know."
Okay. And then in issue 90, one of my favorite issues because it's my first, I can't remember if Major Blood is there, but there's a scene on Broca Beach where the Cobra brass are divvying up the new hierarchy, sort of in the post-Serpentor, post-Cobra Civil War. And I think Darklon is there, and maybe Voltar, and Fred the Seventh in the Cobra Commander suit, and Destro, and the Baroness, and Zartan, and I forget who. But it's 2 pages of amazing Mark Bright and Randy Emerlin art, and I think Destro has a flowchart, and he's saying, you know, Zarana, you're going to be here, and so and so. I can't remember if Major Blood is in that scene, and the issue is down the hallway. I can't grab it.
I doubt that he was. I mean, he appears a few times since. There was that issue where Snake Eyes is set into a
105.
trance, and there's that cool cover with Major Blood looking down the sniper rifle at Snake Eyes. And there's that other more recent issue, 190, where Lady J is on her knees with sort of Major Blood behind her. You know, he's reaching for his pistol as if to execute her. Yeah, it might have been that arc was the last time he had a significant amount of panel time.
So, you know, I mean,
we're talking 100 issues ago now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, There's never sort of a bad reason, you know. Copperhead drives a water vehicle, and Cobra Island is surrounded by water. So Copperhead could be doing... I mean, he's not command. He just drives a vehicle. And Hama may think, no, he wouldn't be sort of helping with any of the managing of the construction. but he has some reason to be there. And, you know, I would like to see some specific Cobras adding to the sort of the sense of scale of the whole construction on the island, and then also Mindbender. And, you know, like Hama's never going to use the interrogator, right? You remember that character?
Yeah.
So, you know, the figures from 1991, and
He came with one of those flying doohickeys backpack things.
He came with a battle copter, and I'm skimming his file card, because this is around when I start to think that Hama's not writing all the file cards. His past is shrouded in mystery. Was he the notorious former head of security for a renegade psychologist or an IRS investigator? Yeah, I think Hama wrote this file card, and you know, he does a little bit what Mindbender does, and he may be off Hama's sort of radar because he's, quote, just a vehicle driver, and you know, he's no one's favorite character. Sorry to the four of you out there with favorite character, but people aren't writing in letters to the comic saying when we're going to see the interrogator.
But he's, you know, still a cool character.
Yeah,
you know.
And you could take his helmet off and he could be an individual, because the file card suggests that he is an individual. He's not like a Viper and there are 50 or 1,000 of him. This is not because Mindbender is doing too much. It's because Mindbender is being stretched too thin. I'm happy for Mindbender to show up this much, but you know, for a lot of the IDW issues in the 86 issue run that Shannon Gallant did, it felt like Mindbender was there so Cobra Commander wasn't talking to himself. And Mindbender is, you know, he's not in command, and he's not, anyway. So that's my, you know, I see these characters like Zorana and Telmax and Zaymot on the cover A's of this arc, and it would be great to see them contributing to the story logic. Not just see them because I like them and I want to see them. You know, it's like, oh, well, I'll take variant covers for that. I'll take fan art for that. But, you know, where have they been?
Very good. So I think we talked about all of the main things that I wanted to cover. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, there's a little detail I wanted to point out that I like. And there are some great sound effects.
Okay.
Great sound effects written into the script. Great treatment of sound effects by letterer Neil Iwatake.
Let's talk about SFX, baby. Let's talk about pew and scree. Let's talk about shooting gun things and the sound effects. We'll see. Let's talk about SFX. Let's talk about SFX.
Thap, thwack, chack, blam, poosh. Oh, excuse me, foosh. We're blam. I did blam already. This one's bigger. You know, all the fight stuff. Kashrang, which is the sound of a robot's arm being torn off in an elevator door having closed, with the elevator trying to move up to the next floor. And there's a bit that I really like on page 16. Scarlet has previously referred to her and Throwdown heading back up by rope to their hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the page with the fisheye lens view panel of the peephole of the door. 1, 2, 3, 4. Panel 4, Scarlet's coming back in the window, and Throwdown is running and drawing his sword and pointing, right? It's great, right? This is comics. You can have a character doing 3 things at once. And there's a great detail of the couch in their hotel room having been flipped on its side. Its cushions are sort of falling off of it, and it's wedged sideways into the corner of the room, and the ropes that Scarlet and Throwdown have used to rappel out of the hotel room are tied to the 2 of the legs of the couch. And that is the, you know, heaviest thing, I guess, in the hotel room, and they've sort of wedged it so that it's not going to get, you know, tugged over. I think that's a good bit of sort of logical prop continuity. I did have a question. They keep saying the words Dawn and Sean.
Yeah.
And I thought part of the conceit of Snake Hunt was that Cobra couldn't find out that the original Snake Eyes was dead. And so don't call him Sean. He's Snake Eyes, right?
On mission, he's Snake Eyes. Yeah.
Yes. And Scarlet here says, "Get ready, I've loosed the Sean," which is funny. And then Helix responds, "So I'm loosing the Dawn on them. I'll mop up after her with my M4. Strap, strack, brap, scree. I'm doing the same with Sean," they yell in front of a lot of security cameras and robots.
Yeah. Who also got robot vision that is recording.
Yeah. I mean, I do it too. I forget, it's easier just to call her Dawn because
I think Dawn is okay because they know who Dawn is, that Dawn used to work for Cobra.
I mean, they still shouldn't, because she is a Joe on a top secret mission. They should call her. They should call her code name. That's my G.I. Joe code name, by the way. Code name.
Unfortunately, apart from calling her Snake Eyes, which sort of fell by the wayside, they don't really call her anything apart from Dawn. So less concerned about Dawn, but specifically about Sean, where there's a very key plot point, which is that he is meant to be Snake Eyes, and when they are on missions, he should be called Snake Eyes, and they are on a mission in front of the enemy combatants and video cameras recording them. And in fact, later on in the plot, Dr. Mindbender is watching one of those video playbacks, and they are very loudly calling him Sean. Is not great. In fact, the reason I hadn't called it out before is that I had it listed as an error detected, because it's so egregious for me. Shouldn't be doing that.
Do you have other error detecteds? Should we cut to that?
I didn't have. That was my only error detected. My only other error detected note was that Hasbro are now in this issue only being thanked for their invaluable assistance once.
Yes, that little typo on the inside front cover in 4-point type in the indicia has been fixed. I wanted to point out one more thing, which is in the larger category of me liking the storytelling of the issue and liking how SL Gallant approaches this series and draws it. And that is page 18. Page 18 has Helix shooting a robot in the head, a robot about to attack Scarlet, and she's out of ammo. Snake Eyes has a very cool Throwdown, Sean, has a very cool moment where he cuts that robot in half. And then 2 wordless panels where he takes the sword out, and the way that he's doing it, you almost think that he's like flicking off the blue sort of blood liquid oil from the robot before he then, in the final panel, resheaths his sword. And this page is a cool guy, awesome, hot moment page. And it does what a full page splash in a lot of comics would do, where it would be Snake Eyes sort of just standing there or cutting the robot in half, but sort of more like a pinup, more like a cover, like I'm imagining with a different artist making a different choice. And, Hama has occasionally in his writing given space for this to his artists, right? I think it happened I'm trying to remember if I saw some excerpt of the plot for issue 250, or if I'm thinking of G.I. Joe Origins 19, which is the wordless issue drawn by Joe Benitez much earlier in the IDW run. And there is a full page splash of Snake Eyes halfway through that issue. And I think Hama's plot, it's like, here you go. We've been building up to this. You've had to do all this very particular continuity of characters moving through space and keeping track of Snake Eyes' clips and his ammo and the equipment that he might be dropping as he goes through the issue. And now you can just draw a cool full page drawing of Snake Eyes being cool, like in the doorway. He's here. And this page here in issue 294 by SL Gallant, where the fight continues and then Snake Eyes ends it, in the hands of maybe I'll say lesser artist, but someone paying less attention to the story, this page, or with a different writer, this would just be like a cool guy / page of Snake Eyes, but there's still a lot of story here. And then you get this very G.I. Joe, very Snake Eyes flourish of taking the sword out of the robot and resheathing it, which is a little bit of closure for the intensity of the fight, which in itself is a continuation of the earlier intense fight. So I like this page. It's like, okay, Shannon Gallant can't sell this page as a like hot full page splash of Snake Eyes with his sword, or Snake Eyes with his sword cutting a robot in half, but sort of.
Yeah, and I get the impression that for Shannon, drawing an interesting storytelling page is more important to him than drawing a more sellable, like page.
I spy with my little eye.
I didn't have that many I spies this issue. We've talked about some of the little details that we picked up as we've been going through. I had one I spy, which is, did you notice that the armored faceplate on the casino bot is ever so slightly different to how they appeared in the first appearance? The first appearance in the issue by Casey Maloney was sort of a more rounded kind of goggle type look to that faceplate eye pop up, and here we've kind of got more rectangular, kind of almost sort of a bit like those paper 3D glasses you used to get popping up. So as Gallant is going along, he's sort of just tweaking the aesthetic of the previous designs just to get it a little bit, I guess, closer to what he thinks they should look like.
I wonder if by the time our listeners hear this, you will have emailed the artist in question and asked him what his thinking is in making a small change to this particular bit of design on the evil robot, such that you can then, on our Facebook page or inserted later into this very audio track, answer your own question.
As Gallant replied to me, insert here. Ba-ding.
Johnny Thurman reading quotes from Gallant. Let's see what he says.
Since the previous artist had a more cartoonish style, at least the one I referenced for the visor, I tried to make the prop fit within my version of the Joe universe. Everyone does it differently, and one isn't better than the other, but for me, I try to make things look like a movie version, just one where the film keeps the costumes more accurate to the comic, cartoon, and toys. Hope that explains it. Okay, back to my holiday tokusatsu marathon.
Oh, great, he did. Interesting. So another little teeny tiny detail which I noticed as we were sort of going along here, which was at the bottom of page 3, while Dawn and Helix are fighting the casino bot in the service tunnel, that bottom panel where she's been punched in the face by Dawn, clang, it's lowered its armored faceplate too fast. Inside the mouth of the bot, you can, she's sort of got her mouth open, a sort of tongue, and then at the back of the mouth, you can see that like a sort of a tube, which is where the flamethrower attachment is connected. So I just thought it was a great little piece of continuity of just maintaining that design, combat piece, particularly given that on page 1, she is using that flamethrower out of the mouth. So I think just cool attention to detail and continuity of the design of the robot.
The flamethrower tube in the mouth, in fact, appears 3 times on page 3, and twice on page 2.
Indeed.
So, Gallant is tracking that.
Tracking is a good word. Was there anything else in the I Spies that you wanted to call out? You don't have to.
No. I have nothing else.
I didn't really. I mean, we talked about a couple of as we went along, but I've not called out a hammer time or a colloquialism. But that moment where they're policing up their brass is a good one for both.
Quote of the week. 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 Quote of the week.
Favorite lane of dialogue?
I didn't quite have one, but not in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. I had 2. I had Helix saying, "Wow, it brought missiles to a knife fight," and Dawn saying, "Yo, sunshine, I hear your mum is a washer dryer combo," to try and get his attention and distract it for Helix. Yeah, I think one of Hammer's strengths is that he does always come up with these great turns of phrases for insults and hyperbole.
Yo, cola, nut, grape, soda.
It's Joey time.
Yo, George, score.
6. It's in and of itself, I would actually give it a 7. It's a great issue, but in the continuity of previous issues and how important any one issue is right now, heading up to 300, for what we were talking about, some story pacing or redundancy from the current story, it loses a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'll just say ditto. I think we're exactly on the same page with that summary.
Also, no letters page still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sent in a letter for on the back of this one, so we'll see what happens with that. Nothing, probably. The next time we will be talking about the next issue of ARAH. It will be issue 295, which strangely enough is the next issue after 294. It'll be High Stakes Part 5, I believe. And that is due out on July 13th. About 2 weeks away from the last one. So we are meant to be getting fortnightly. June 29th, June 13th, July 27th. Exciting. But before then, we will be joining in with Cobra Convergence, and we will be having a Cobra special next week, where we'll be talking about some of our favourite crazy Cobras. And Tim has dropped a few hints as to what we might be touching on in that episode, along with, get this, spoilers, a very special appearance from the Chief, who will be joining us back again after a little while away. So where can people find you, Tim?
My creative partners and I have a company that releases funny internet videos and comedy, atomicabe.com, and we have a YouTube page where you can watch all of our videos. My brick and mortar comic book store in Somerville, Massachusetts is Hub Comics, and my G.I. Joe blog is a realamericanbook.com.
Excellent. And was it your birthday, Tim, yesterday at the time of recording?
Yes.
How was that?
The miniature golf that I mentioned at the
That
top
was
of the
a
episode.
birthday celebration in the form of golf. Excellent.
Yeah.
And did you see the picture that I drew for you yet?
So on my birthday, I try to stay off the computer.
Oh, man.
And so sort of late night on my birthday or the next day, I will comb through email and social media messages.
Let's do this in real time then. I can send it via Messenger.
Wow. That's great.
So for those of you listening on audio only, I have drawn for Tim's birthday one of his very favourite characters, Gristle, wishing him a happy birthday.
Thanks. Is that whiteout on top of the ink and marker?
Yes, it is.
No, it's not just marker. There's some watercolor.
Yeah. There's all sorts in there. There's watercolor, a bit of marker, and a bit of pencil, and some whiteout.
And inking with a big fat brush.
Yep.
Or a brush pen.
A brush pen and Pilot Parallel pen.
Thank you.
So you can find us on all of the usual places too. So talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has links to all of those places. If you're not on the Facebook group, Talking Joe, a G.I. Joe podcast, join in over there where we have some good discussions. Talking Joe on Twitter, Talking Joe Comics on Instagram. You can also be interactive. And on our website, we've got a button where you can click on it and leave us a voicemail of up to 90 seconds long, responding to questions, giving feedback on our previous episode, and so on. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe. And a big thanks to our backers, Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, and our latest subscriber, Rob, who are getting access to episodes early, as well as some exclusive content, such as the PDF of the breakdowns to final colours for Saturday Morning Adventures, which is what swung it for Rob. So join in over there and be like the rest of those cool kids. So I think that is us all done until next time. But until then, remember...
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast!
With just 2 guys this week. One of them over there in that place they call America, and another in Old Blighty. Laters. Well, did you follow the Hiss Tank reveal on the classified Hiss Tank this week?
I was actually more interested that someone said it's too big. Someone said that's too expensive. This must be huge. And then Ron Rudat said, I've seen it at Hasbro. It's amazing. And I thought, when was Ron Rudat at Hasbro?
Well, they actually involved him in this project. So they've kind of looped him in, and they're basing a bonus figure on the original color scheme. Well, when he put forward the Hiss Driver costume, he did he did his design, and then he sort of goes over it in sort of photocopies and goes over it in different color schemes and shares it with the Hasbro team and says, what do you think of these different color options, which, and that's the process that they use. So I think as part of the bonus figure, they're taking these 7 color roughs and saying backers can vote on their favorite version of this, and that will be a bonus figure that comes with the classified Hiss Tank.
That's amazing.
So yeah, they've specifically said that this is based on a Ron Rudat sort of concept drawing. So they kind of making sure that they've involved him with the project. And yeah, on the launch video as well, I think they talk about that they'd seen and spoken to Ron Rudat, and that Lenny, the main designer, was really psyched by it because such a pedigree in designing all of the original key characters, and he's sort of living that same legacy. So
cool. All right, I'm on a YouTube video from 3 days ago where 3 people are talking about this, and they've got screen caps from the like Hasbro video. Are the treads gonna rotate?
Yeah, the treads are gonna move. Yeah.
Oh wow!
And it's got a light on the front, so it will like shoot out a Cobra sign, like the like the Spidey sort of sign projector
Spidey
thing.
Signal.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so it's looking very cool, but the price point is high. It's $300. So
Yeah, jeez. And it comes with how many figures? Is it-
so to date, they have, in terms of what's been unlocked, they've got the basic Hiss with all of its cool features and the lights and the sort of the little compartment at the back that opens up, and all these kind of nice little details. They've got a main Hiss Tank driver. They've got a bonus figure for the variant color scheme. They have got a bolt-on missile unit to go in the plugs in the side. And they've also got a swappable screen to make it look more like the classic design. And then there's a couple more unlocks to be revealed.
What do you mean swappable screen? Where's that?
So the canopy, at the front.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Because this one has the red detailing.
Yeah, so there's the one with the red detailing, and it's got these liftable flaps on the side and stuff. So it's kind of modern reinvention. But then they're also going to include a very classic design to it, where it is just the sort of all clear canopy.
So are you gonna?
Well, I'm sort of seeing all of the coverage and getting a serious fear of missing out. But it will be big. It is expensive. So I'm a little bit on the fence at the moment. I'm gonna see how it plays out. See what other bonuses get included. Yeah, it's a lot.
Separate from the size, do you feel like in the middle of 2022 you can buy a toy for $300 with a lot of shipping?
I don't know. Yeah, I could do it. Whether I would live to tell the tale if my wife found how much I spend on it was another matter. But yeah.
Wow, jeez. Okay, now I'm on the HasLab website. So what can you fit in the cargo bay?
So it's got like a jump seat. So it's got space for three figures essentially. The main pilot in the front, the gunner turret at the top, and then just one seat in the back. So you can only really fit one person at the back on the seat.
Okay.
With like a sort of weapons rack as well.
Missile rack. Well, that looks neat. All right.